In 1909, a young man slept on a bench in a public park in Vienna. He was cold. He was hungry. He had no money. He had no job. He had no future that anyone could see. 30 years later, this same man would command the largest army in European history. He would occupy almost every country on the European continent. He would be responsible for the deaths of over 70 million people. He would launch the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jewish people. His name was Adolf Hitler. This is not a story that glorifies him. It is a story that asks, how? How does someone like this happen? How does a failed artist, a homeless man, a rejected nobody, rise to become the most dangerous person in the history of the modern world? Because if we understand how, we might recognize it. If it starts to happen again, Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small Austrian town called Braunau am Inn, on the border with Germany. His father, Alois Hitler, was a customs official, strict, cold, authoritarian. He beat young Adolf regularly. His mother, Clara, was warm and devoted. She adored her son. Adolf adored her in return. Young Adolf was a decent student. In primary school, he showed some talent for drawing. He liked history. He was imaginative. But when he reached secondary school, his performance deteriorated. He began to fail. His father wanted him to become a customs official. Like himself, Adolf wanted to be an artist. The two visions were completely incompatible. His father died in 1903. Adolf was 13. His mother, Clara, gave him more freedom. He dropped out of school. He spent his time drawing, reading, walking, daydreaming. He imagined himself becoming a great artist. He had not yet encountered the world that would reject that dream and turn it into something else entirely. In 1907, Adolf Hitler applied to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. He was rejected. He applied again in 1908. He was rejected again. The rejection letter said his sample drawings were unsatisfactory. He showed too few people, too many buildings. He was better suited to architecture than painting, but he had no school certificate to study architecture. Then his mother died, December 21st, 1908. Clara Hitler died of cancer. Adolf was 19 years old. He sat by her bedside to the end. Her doctor later said he had never seen anyone so prostrate with grief. Hitler was alone now, no family, no career, no prospects. He went to Vienna and slowly descended into poverty. Vienna in 1909 was a magnificent city, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But beneath its magnificent facade, it was also a city of fierce social competition, of racial nationalism, of political anger. Young Hitler lived in homeless shelters. He sold hand-painted postcards for small amounts of money. He listened to the political arguments that filled Viennese life, and something in him began to change. Vienna's politics in the early 1900s were inflamed with nationalism. The mayor of Vienna, Karl Lueger, was a brilliant, charismatic politician who built his power on anti-Semitism. He blamed Jewish people for Vienna's social problems. Hitler later said he had learned everything he needed to know about politics from Karl Lueger. He was absorbing a lesson in how to use hatred as a political tool. Hitler escaped Vienna and his poverty by moving to Munich, Germany in 1913. Then in August 1914, the First World War began. Hitler volunteered immediately and was accepted into the German army. He later called this the greatest moment of his life. He was finally part of something. He had a purpose. He had comrades. He had a uniform. For a man who had nothing, the army gave him everything. Hitler served 4 years. He was wounded twice. He was awarded the Iron Cross First Class, one of Germany's highest military decorations. He carried messages between command posts, a dangerous job. He was not a general. He was not even an officer. He remained a corporal. But he was brave, and the war, which destroyed so much, gave Hitler something, a framework for understanding the world through violence. Then Germany lost the war. On November 11, 1918, the armistice was signed. Hitler was in a military hospital, recovering from a gas attack that had temporarily blinded him. When the news came that Germany had surrendered, that the Kaiser had abdicated, that the war was over, Hitler wept. He later said he decided in that moment to go into politics, to find out who had betrayed Germany, to get revenge. Germany after the war was a country in crisis. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, humiliated Germany completely. Germany lost territory. Germany lost its military. Germany was forced to accept sole responsibility for causing the war. Germany had to pay enormous reparations to the victorious Allies. The German economy collapsed. Germans were angry, humiliated, looking for someone to blame. Hitler joined a tiny political group called the German Workers' Party. He attended a meeting in 1919, almost by accident, as a political spy for the German army. When someone said something he violently disagreed with, Hitler stood up and began to speak, and something extraordinary happened. The room fell silent. People who had never seen him before were transfixed. Hitler could speak in a way that moved people completely. Hitler had found his gift. He could speak, not in the formal, distant style of traditional politicians, but with rage, with emotion, with simple explanations for complex problems. He told his audiences what they desperately wanted to hear, that Germany had not truly lost the war, that Germany had been stabbed in the back by traitors at home, by Jewish people, by communists. The lie was comfortable, and it spread. The party changed its name. to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, in German, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. The shortened form was Nazi. Hitler became the party's leader. He gave it a new symbol, the swastika. He created its visual identity, the red banners, the black eagle, the theatrical spectacle of rallies and torchlight marches. He was not just a politician, he was a showman. In November 1923, Hitler decided the time had come to seize power. He launched the Beer Hall Putsch, an attempt to overthrow the Bavarian government and march on Berlin. Like Mussolini had marched on Rome, it failed completely. Police opened fire. 16 Nazis were killed. Hitler was arrested. He was tried for treason and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Prison changed Hitler's strategy, but not his goals. He served only 9 months of his 5-year sentence. In prison, he dictated a book to his deputy Rudolf Hess. He called it Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In it, he laid out everything: his hatred of Jewish people, his plans for German expansion, his belief that Germany must dominate Europe. He hid nothing. The horror that was coming was written down clearly before 1924. After prison, Hitler rebuilt the Nazi Party, but with a different approach. He decided to seek power through elections. He would not overthrow the system. He would use the system to take it over. He would get elected, and then, once inside the system, he would destroy it from within. He said, "We will hold our noses and enter the Reichstag." The Nazis struggled. Through the mid-1920s, the German economy recovered. When people had jobs and food and hope, they were less interested in Hitler's message of rage and blame. In the elections of 1928, the Nazis won only 2.6% of the vote. They were a fringe movement, barely relevant. And then, everything changed. The Wall Street crash of 1929 sent shockwaves across the world. American banks called in their loans to Germany. The German economy collapsed almost immediately. By 1932, 6 million Germans were unemployed. 1 in 3 workers had no job. Families were starving. The social fabric was tearing. And Hitler had simple answers for people with desperate questions. Nazi votes exploded from 2.6% in 1928 to 18% in 1930 to 37% in July 1932. The Nazis were the largest party in the German parliament without having a majority. But the establishment, the conservatives who thought they could use Hitler and then control him, made a fatal miscalculation. In January 1933, President Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor. They thought they could manage him. Within weeks, Hitler moved to consolidate power. On February 27, 1933, the Reichstag, the German parliament, was set on fire. The Nazis blamed a communist. Hitler used the fire as justification for emergency powers. The Reichstag fire decree suspended civil liberties and allowed mass arrests. Within days, thousands of political opponents were in prison. The speed was breathtaking. The Enabling Act, passed in March 1933, gave Hitler the power to make laws without parliament. Germany's democracy was voted away by Germany's own parliament. Political parties were banned. Trade unions were dissolved. The press was taken over. The legal system was captured. Judges who made inconvenient decisions were replaced. In less than 6 months, Adolf Hitler had turned a democracy into a dictatorship. The speed of Hitler's consolidation surprised even his supporters. He moved against rivals within his own party. On the night of the Long Knives, in June 1934, Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA stormtroopers, who had helped Hitler rise, was murdered. Dozens of other potential rivals were killed. Hitler had shown that he was not bound by loyalty or law or any rule at all. In August 1934, President Hindenburg died. Hitler combined the offices of Chancellor and President. He became the absolute ruler of Germany. He required every soldier in the German military to swear a personal oath, not to Germany, but to Adolf Hitler personally. The army was no longer Germany's army. It was Hitler's army. The man who slept on a park bench in 1909 had made himself a dictator. How did the German people allow this? How did an educated, modern, European civilization let this happen? This is perhaps the most important question of the 20th century, and the answer is uncomfortable. It happened gradually, step by step, each step seeming manageable. By the time people understood the direction of travel, it was too late to stop. The German economy did improve under Hitler in the early years. Unemployment fell dramatically. Roads were built. Industry was restarted. People who had been desperate had jobs and food. They were grateful. They looked away from what they did not want to see. They told themselves that the stories about persecution were exaggerated, or that the people being persecuted had done something to deserve it. The psychology of complicity is not unique to Germany. The persecution of Jewish people did not begin with the death camps. It began with words. Newspapers called them subhuman. Laws removed their citizenship. They were banned from professions. Their children were expelled from schools. Boycotts of their businesses were organized. Step by step, Jewish people were pushed out of German society. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 made Jews legally non-persons. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, on November 9, 1938, showed where this road led. Across Germany and Austria, in one night, hundreds of synagogues were burned. Over 7,000 Jewish-owned businesses were destroyed. Around 100 Jewish people were killed. 30,000 were arrested and sent to concentration camps. The streets were covered in broken glass, and most of Germany did nothing to stop it. Then came the war, and then came the Holocaust. We have covered the war in other videos, but the Holocaust must be named clearly here. Beginning in 1941, the Nazi regime began the systematic murder of every Jewish person in Europe, not as a side effect of war, as a deliberate policy. 6 million Jewish people were murdered. 6 million. This was the destination of the road that began in a Vienna park in 1909. How did it happen? The historians say several things combined. A severe economic crisis that made people desperate. A humiliating military defeat that made people angry. A charismatic leader who provided simple explanations for complex problems. A media system that could be captured and turned to propaganda. Existing prejudices that could be amplified into policy. And, crucially, good people who did nothing. There were Germans who resisted, Germans who hid Jewish neighbors, who forged papers, who refused to participate, who tried to stop what was happening. They were few, and most of them paid a terrible price for their courage. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Protestant pastor who actively resisted Nazism, was executed just weeks before the war ended. Courage existed, but courage was dangerous, and most people chose safety. Hitler's end came in the same city where the Weimar Republic had been proclaimed. As Soviet armies surrounded Berlin, in April 1945, Hitler retreated to his underground bunker. He blamed everyone, his generals, his people. He said Germany deserved to lose because it was not strong enough to win. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet soldiers just blocks away, Adolf Hitler killed himself. What does Hitler's story teach us? It teaches us that the most dangerous people are not always recognized as dangerous when they begin. It teaches us that economic despair makes people vulnerable to simple answers and scapegoating. It teaches us that democracy can be voted away by democratic process. It teaches us that prejudice, when organized and given power, has no natural limit, and it teaches us that silence is never neutral.